In this video, I want to highlight several ways that we can start to learn about our data using the data analysis ToolPak that we added on in Excel, as well as some of the basic types of charts that are available within Excel. I'm using Excel for Mac in this example, and most of the processes I've seen are pretty similar across Mac and PC. However, I'll highlight at least one minor difference. So I have this spreadsheet. It is from an annual survey of Australian undergraduates 4 to 6 months after they graduated, and they gather information about their career after graduating from university, including, as you can see in this table, the median salaries by study area and gender for 2022. I thought this would be an interesting and straightforward example of a continuous variable, one that we can group and graph in several different ways. Because if you look at this table, you do see a whole lot of numbers and you see some differences between different majors. However, it's really hard to engage in descriptive inference, starting to understand the differences that you see within the data without trying to use some descriptive statistics. And that's what I'm going to talk about here. So let's start by creating a descriptive statistics table. So I'm going to go to data analysis, and you can see here in the data analysis ToolPak, you have pretty much every type of basic statistical technique that we're going to be using in this course, up to and including regression. But for this, I'm going to be using descriptive statistics. I'm going to choose my range of data, which are going to be both for male and female students, as well as total. And then I'm going to output it. I'm just going to put it right here next to the data. You can also put it in a new worksheet. And I'm clicking summary statistics because that's what I want to focus on here. Mean, median, modes, standard deviation, the range for these different variables. And so what you can see is, because I highlighted more than one column, you can see more than one column summarizing the male students, female students, and total students. You see the mean, the median is a bit below the mean because you do have some outliers like dentistry. You have the standard deviation, which we'll be talking about more in workshop, how steep the distribution is. That is measured by kurtosis. Skewedness is whether it's skewed towards the right or the left. The range is almost $47,000 between the lowest male reported income, median income by study area, and the maximum. The minimum is $54,300 in this example, and the maximum is $101,000. And you give the total dollar amount as well as the number of observations that are in your data. In the real data, there's actually some missing observations and ones that were not available. So if you go to other tables, you also see that some of these values they're stored as text instead of numbers. I've already switched those over into numbers. There are other things that you can do to try to learn more about your data, to describe your data, as well as to potentially start to think about descriptive inference. One that I mentioned in lecture is a histogram, just to look at the general distribution. You can do that pretty easily with the regular charting function within Excel. So if you go to Insert and then Charts, and then you can just click on Histogram, you see an empty space there. And so what you want to do is you want to go to Select Your Data and then choose your chart range. I'm just going to choose the overall values in the total column, and then I'm just going to click OK. And so you can see here, and you can move the chart around wherever you want to have it, and you can give this chart a quick title. Let's say median salaries of total undergraduate respondents. Academics are fond of boring fonts, so you can switch out the fonts, as well as for the axes by just highlighting it and then choosing what you want to do. However, this histogram isn't very useful because it's only created 4 bins. And so you see that the most of the observations, you have 14 that are between 64,200 and 76,200. But that is grouping a whole lot, and it might be missing some of the observations that or the information that we're really interested in. So if you go and with the Mac, just highlight the columns until they are seen as selected, or for the PC, you would highlight the x-axis values. But here in the PC, in the Mac, it is the columns. If you go over to bins, you can change it from auto to bin width. You can choose how wide your bins are, so you can change that maybe to $5,000 bins, and you can see that there is a narrower band that has more observations that had been lost when you had the fewer columns. Or you can specify the number of bins. So this is 10 right there. You can reduce it 9, 8. You can play around with your chart to kind of see what makes the most sense for you. You can also limit the bottom and the top range of those bins. So that, and you can also change various things about the chart. You can change colors to something that might be of more interest to you. If you want to print it out, you want to make it some color that's easy to print out. Potentially also you don't want this y-axis there. That's a bit distracting. Histograms often you might use the labels of the bins instead of using the y-axis. You can do that basically just by deleting the y-axis there and then right-clicking on the bins, and then you just click Add Data Labels, and then you can add those values there. You can also format the labels to and the bins to have more round numbers that make sense. Let's see, what other ways that we can try to get to know our data? Another way maybe is to kind of visualize the difference between male and female students and their values. So just let me click over here and let's insert another type of graph that might be useful for you. So you go into Insert and then Graphs. The 2D columns are vertical. I want to do it kind of like this here with the values and do it horizontal. So I'll do a 2D bar graph. Move it here out of the way. Let's select data as we did earlier. And this time, let's go ahead and click just those 2 columns. So you get more of a comparison. And then we also need to add the labels for these different study areas. Remember, we were talking in lecture about labels and values. These are the values, these are the labels. And so we have the data and we have the axis labels. We click OK. And what we see is a really scrunched up graph. And given the number of values of the labels, I want to try to make it longer, and I did that. And what you see is a more visual representation of the differences between male and female students. You see in tourism and hospitality, there's quite noticeable difference. Veterinary science really isn't noticeable. Dentistry, there is a difference. Humanities, culture, and social science. Agriculture and environmental studies would be one in which female students' median income was higher than male students. But maybe, so this is one way of kind of graphing to be able to understand the comparison. Maybe we want to sort these values so that the highest salary ones like dentistry and maybe medicine have a clear ranking of these areas here. So what we can do is just get rid of that graph. Let's go ahead and sort maybe on the total number of values. Okay, now that these data are sorted from smallest to largest value along the total, I can go ahead and make a graph of the male and female values. So I'll select the same columns. And I'll select the same horizontal values. And you can already see that there's a big difference between pharmacy down at the bottom and dentistry at the top. But let's see the difference between the different categories. And you see here, now this graph has dentistry on top and pharmacy down at the bottom. If these labels are too big and it distorts the side of your chart, you can go ahead and just remove some of the words, and that will be reflected in the chart on the right. And then you can change the title here. Male in blue. I can also change that format there with the font. And potentially colors, especially people who might be colorblind, might have difficulty with certain colors, and you want to just go ahead and focus on black and white or different shading. You can also easily change it there. Okay, so now we have a graph there, and you see the differences. Potentially also you might want to graph the difference between them more explicitly. So you see the differences are noticeable here, but the size of them might be lost given the overall size in the salary values. So you can create a new column here and just call this difference, and then use a formula, create the male value minus the female value, because most of these just observationally seem to be higher for the male than the female, also given the literature about pay disparities. And what you see is we have one or two values that are negative, but you do see quite a range between veterinary science and communications, in which the gap is quite small. Others, like tourism and hospitality, it's over $9,000 between male and female students. So let's go ahead and just graph that gap, and then we'll call it a day. Insert 2D, select data, chart range, choose that new column of data that I generated, the labels on the left. And we can play around with where the axis roll is and move these values over here. But what you can see, and you can sort by the column as we did with the other column, this is another way to visualize your data and see the quite large disparities, another way to try to learn your data. That is several initial ways to try to learn about your data through descriptive statistics, both through the overall snapshots, the moments, the means, modes, standard deviations, etc., as well as graphically. Hope you found this useful, and I look forward to discussing this more in workshop. Thank you.